As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 8 of season 11, and today we are going to be finishing up our coverage of the series Loudermilk. Now, this sassy arsehole has really made me laugh over the last 2 seasons, and I am hoping that season 3 is just as good. Obviously, after this it got cancelled, or maybe they just made enough seasons. It probably got cancelled, but I'm not going to speculate on that. I could probably read up on it. You'd think I'd be more prepared for this, since it's my podcast, but hey-ho, we're just running with it. But yeah, I cannot wait to get into this world again with him, and just see how he now deals with having this baby. So at the end of last season, we saw that his father died, but his father had already had a kid with the woman that he slept with in season 1. And at the end of season 2, this mother came back into Loudermilk's life, handed him the baby and said, "I can't do this anymore," and ran. So Loudermilk, Ben and Claire now have this baby to look after. And I have a feeling it's going to go very similar down the route of 3 Men and a Baby, where they don't know what the fuck to do, but they will get through it somehow. But let's get into it. Let's find out what's going on. And yeah, I just cannot wait to get into the show. So, this is Loudermilk, Season 3, Episodes 1 to 3. Episode 3, Stuck in the Middle with You. And so, like I feared at the end of last season when I was covering this, yeah, it's already started to be very baby heavy, which I'm not a massive fan of, but hey ho, let's get into it. So we pick up directly from where last season left. Loudermilk's dad's baby mama has just left his brother with him and ran off. Claire, who has now moved down the hall, has found out that Loudermilk has this child, and obviously Ben has as well, because he lives with Loudermilk. So Loudermilk has absolutely no idea what to do with his child. Ben, however, does. He seems to have a real affinity for looking after this child, and even though Loudermilk doesn't really want this baby around, he's obviously going to be protective of it. So when Ben takes the child off of him, and Loudermilk becomes a little bit mama bear about it, like don't drop him, Ben basically just scoops this kid up and really starts to take care of him. It's good because someone needs to, because obviously his mother's gone and Loudermilk's fucking useless. But now Loudermilk has a dilemma, because although he's trying to get back in contact with the mother isn't answering the phone, and Loudermilk doesn't know what to do. He thinks about calling the cops, but Ben tells him, look, if you call the cops, what's going to happen is they're going to come, they're going to take the baby, it's going to go back to his mother, but then eventually they're going to end up taking the baby into care. So what do you want to do? Do you want your family to actually be brought up in the care system, or we can take a stab at it? Again, Loudermilk doesn't know what to do, but obviously Ben has got some sort of affinity to this child now, and it's probably a good idea that Loudermilk looks after him instead of the kid getting lost in the system, until at least the mother comes back. But Ben was part of a babysitters club when he was younger, and he was actually the guy in charge of it at one point, and so he's got all these like weird ideas about how to look after the baby, including the fact that he has started breastfeeding the child. Now he's breastfeeding through sort of like a tubing system that he's got this thing strapped to his chest, bit like those bras with the, where you can put wine in them, and then there's a straw that you obviously suck on. And so Ben has one of these sort of systems in place so that the baby's feeding naturally, and it just looks a little bit weird. But Ben is fully geared up for this, and he really wants to make a go of this. So Loudermilk is essentially trusting him with it, even though when everyone inquires about who is looking after the child, and he says Ben, everyone's a little bit sceptical, but Ben seems to be doing great. He really seems to have come into his own on this one. But during the night time is when things really start to change, because obviously the baby is going to be crying at night, and he doesn't know where he is, he doesn't know where his mum is, and he has to get used to these two new people. And it's a very strange place for the kid to be. And like most babies, he is screaming down the house most nights. So Loudermilk is usually the one that gets up with him and starts to look after him. However, during the night, Loudermilk starts telling the kid stories because, well, it's the only thing that really keeps him heading off to sleep. Or at least it soothes him for a while. I mean, Ron Livingston's got a pretty good voice, so I can imagine it would kind of send you off to sleep. He begins to tell the child stories of his time when he was on the road with these bands and when he was an up-and-comer in the music scene. And he says that he used to go out all the time partying and taking drugs and doing all this crazy shit. But when he actually tried to get the bands involved in this, as much as they were, a little bit crazy and taking a lot of drugs, what they tend to do is they would, especially during the midweeks, they would step back from it a little bit. They'd still take drugs, but they'd temper the way that they did it so that they weren't constantly high while on stage. But Loudermilk could never get into that, and that's why he ended up in such a fucked up state when he was younger. But while he's telling these stories, he's realising that these are stories that he can help write his book. So he ends up recording them while he's doing them. And this is obviously going to end up helping in the long run when it comes to his book, which he still hasn't written yet. But while he's up throughout the night, he might as well be doing something with his time. And if it's something creative that helps soothe the baby as well, then why not? Both the group and the Reverend are actually concerned about the child being looked after by Loudermilk and Ben. But when he tells the group that Ben is doing a really good job, everyone in the group seems to kind of come on board with it and say, look, it takes a village, so we could all help and raise the baby. Whereas the Reverend is very much a case of, well, I know good adoption services and, you could give it to someone who lives in the church. And Loudermilk's a little bit sceptical of that because, well, in any situation that happens, it's always a little bit dodgy. And you don't really know where these kids are going to end up. And that's the scary thing about it. Yes, okay, they're in a Christian family, but I mean, I've seen multitudes of films where the person is Christian, they take hold of a child and they end up abusing it. So, I'm not saying it's everyone, but there's occasions. So Loudermilk's sceptical of this, and he doesn't want his brother to go anywhere, really. And so Loudermilk decides to go and see his brother's mum. When he gets there, however, he is confronted by her sister, who tells him she doesn't know where her sister is and that her sister has left town with the kids. She thought that they were going on holiday and she was just going to be looking after their flat for a while, but actually she's gone for good. So we're unsure as to where she's gone now, but we know that Loudermilk certainly isn't going to be able to give his brother back anytime soon. So it looks like this is going to be a season-long arc. But towards the end of the episode, we actually see that Loudermilk starts to deal with some of the quirks that the baby has. For instance, at night, he realises that baby doesn't actually like to wear a nappy, and that might be why he's so irritable at night. And so when Loudermilk takes it off, he thinks that he's cracked the code, because he sits down with the baby, Ben comes in, and, everything seems to be fine. But the problem is that, obviously, he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's trying, he really is, but he still doesn't have a fucking clue. So, obviously, you end up hearing the baby farting and then shitting down Loudermilk's arm. So, as much as he thinks he's got it, nailed down, he really doesn't. Like, this is going to be a complicated one for him, and it's just not easy. Claire, however, wants nothing to do with the baby. She thinks he's cute, but that's about it. And she's more concerned about the band that she joined last season, because it seems like they're having trouble. Now, obviously, she was terrible, and she was only playing the triangle. She was just doing a bit of percussion, and she couldn't even do that. Sorry, she was playing the tambourine, not the triangle. But she's terrible at it. And so when she goes and sees Felix and talks to him about when the band are next getting together, because she loved the night before, Felix tells her, look, there's someone in the band who's ill. We're not going to be doing a gig anytime soon, so just play it by ear for now. But that very night, they end up going and having a gig, and Claire obviously finds out. She finds out that they've renamed the band so that technically they don't have to take Claire with them, and Claire confronts them about it. They tell her, look, you were terrible. She knows she was terrible. She can't get over the fact how bad she was, but this is something that she really enjoys. It gets her away from the people who are addicts, and she doesn't feel judged while she's doing this thing, even though they're probably judging her for having no rhythm whatsoever. But she doesn't feel like she has to shy away from this, and she can get better. She knows that she can, but she just wants them to give her a chance. And so the band end up agreeing to it, but Felix eventually says, I'll find someone else who can fire her. So, like I said, it's going to be a very baby-heavy season by the looks of things, and hopefully it doesn't take over the full storyline and we actually see Loudermilk being a bit more sassy and whatever. But we'll see where this goes. Episode 2, There Goes My Baby. And once again, it seems that Loudermilk is getting more and more used to having this kid around. He is still thinking about putting him up for adoption, but it seems to be swinging more in the way that he's going to keep his brother. But again, at this point, he has no legal right to. Just because the child has been handed to him doesn't mean that it's actually his child. So essentially, at this point, it's kind of illegal what he's doing. He should have probably handed the child over to the authorities and let them deal with it, and then if he got him back, then that's great. Or if he legally adopted him, but again, that means he has to have the parent there to actually sign the paperwork to actually take him. But the way that Ben and Loudermilk are actually acting is kind of like a couple at this point. While they're in group, it seems like there is tension between the two of them because Loudermilk says that he is basically supporting Ben and this child. But Ben gets offended by this and tells him, look, I'm the one looking after your relative. I'm not anything to do with him. But I do these things because I care about him and you. And essentially he becomes the partner at home. I'm not going to say the wife or the woman because that's not fair. But he becomes the partner that is at home who is looking after this child. And he feels put upon because it's not really anything to do with him. But one thing that can be sure is that Ben has started to display some talent when it comes to singing. He's actually been able to make up some songs and has done pretty well by putting them out on Instagram and getting plenty of likes and plenty of shares. So like I was saying before, he has this affinity for looking after kids, but that could be something that could become lucrative for him. However, after Ben and Loudermilk fall out, Ben goes outside and starts talking to a woman who he knows from baby yoga. While they're talking about babies and all that kind of stuff, this woman thinks that Ben is actually gay with Loudermilk. But when she finds out that they're not actually together and Ben introduces her to Loudermilk, they seem to have a little bit of chemistry. And Ben essentially sets them up on a date because both Ben and Claire have been having a go at Loudermilk because he doesn't date anymore. He keeps telling them that he's too busy writing his book and looking after his kid and blah, 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 blah. But it's always excuses. And when he tries to give dating advice within the group, they say, how can you give any sort of advice on that kind of thing because you don't do it? And so Loudermilk and this woman go on this date. Turns out that she is a Yelp reviewer, and when she actually starts talking about the business, Loudermilk's, you can see him just getting pissed off. He's a critic that got paid for his actual opinions, whereas she isn't. But apparently she sued Yelp because they weren't paying her even though the advice that she was giving was for free. So he's a little bit put out by this woman straight away. But because they're at this restaurant and someone overhears that she's an elite member or an ultra member or whatever the fuck it was called, they realise that this woman could actually give them a bad review and it could hurt the restaurant. So they seat them straight away, and you can kind of see the benefit of having this ultra member or whatever they are. But when she sits down and starts being very snippety with the waitress that's in charge, Loudermilk sees a little bit of himself in this woman because Well, she's exactly like what he is, apart from the fact that she's doing it for food instead of music. She becomes a bit of a snob, a bit of an arsehole, and he doesn't like what he sees. So when he gets back and Ben asks how the date went, he says, well, it didn't go well. He tells him about what happened, and it was an awkward date, and it didn't seem to go in the way that Ben was hoping. Ben was hoping that Loudermilk would date this woman and they would go out a few more times and eventually they could end up together. Because Ben feels responsible for both Loudermilk and this baby at the minute, and that's not fair on him. And so he just wants Loudermilk to find someone so that eventually he can stop worrying about this child and Loudermilk. Ben, however, gets blindsided by the new guy, because the new guy, now that he's heard that Ben has some sort of talent, has actually decided to give him a leg up. He wants to be Ben's manager, and the first gig that they have is at this church fete that is going to be put on by Father Michael to raise money for the church. However, Ben isn't very convinced by it and ends up getting really nervous beforehand. But he does the gig, and it turns out that he's pretty decent at what he does. And this is what I was saying before about this could be very lucrative for him. But it seems like now, especially with the new guy getting on board, that it's going to be a real big issue for Ben, because he's going to want part of what Ben has, and he's actually done nothing towards it. But while they're at this church fete, all of a sudden an Amber Alert goes out. Now, Loudermilk didn't actually get the Amber Alert because at the start of the episode, we see Loudermilk being a sassy arsehole as always in a store. Like I said, he's gone out on this date with this woman and she has been a sassy arsehole to the waitress. He has gone into a store and been a sassy arsehole to the guy behind the counter. They are kind of very similar. But what actually happened was Loudermilk has gone in because Clyde, his brother, has peed on his phone. So Loudermilk went in to get a new phone. But Loudermilk is a very basic person. He doesn't want any sort of social media, or he doesn't want any real internet connectivity. So when he asks for a bog standard phone, he's basically it's sort of an Apple store really, but I guess that they didn't get the sponsorship for it, so they couldn't use them. And, if they were denigrating the product, then, they can't really have Apple sponsor it because Apple wouldn't be happy with that. And so he ends up having a go at this clerk because he doesn't want a bells and whistles phone. He just wants a fucking normal phone. And eventually he ends up getting a burner phone from one of those gas stations. So he doesn't actually get this Amber Alert. So when he goes to check his phone and says that he didn't get anything, everyone else is looking at their phone in horror because the Amber Alert that is out is for Clyde and Loudermilk. And as the episode comes to a close, we see Loudermilk say, I didn't get an Amber, and then he gets tackled by a security guard. So we can only imagine that someone, I can't think who, has put out an Amber Alert on Loudermilk. Now, we know that the date didn't go well, and at the time when the Amber Alert happened, he was talking to the woman he had the date with, so maybe she put out the Amber Alert. Loudermilk had also discussed with Father Michael about actually looking after his brother and whether he was going to use the adoption system. Now, when he went in to see who was going to be adopting this child, he found out it was the people who moved in down the block from the church in the last season, the ones who complained about the group. So maybe it was them who put out this Amber Alert on him. But either way, it's a shitty thing to do. But we've got to find out now how he's going to resolve this, because he's obviously going to be under arrest for taking a baby, even though he didn't. He was given it. Episode 3, American Idiot. So after being hauled off by the cops, it turns out that it wasn't the people that wanted to adopt Clyde, or in fact the woman that he went on a date with. It turns out that the person that has actually called the cops on him is the mother of Clyde. So she's had time to think, and it was just that her other kids were driving her crazy at the time, and she had a moment of madness, and she's gone and given Clyde to his brother. But now she's all good, and she wants him back. However, when she turned up at the apartment, Loudermilk wasn't there, because he was out at this church fete. And then she tried to ring Loudermilk, but because Loudermilk now has a new phone, she wasn't able to get through. And so she thought of the next best thing, which is apparently putting out an Amber Alert so that people are on the lookout for a man who has stolen a child, even though he was given the child. So Annette, the mother, explains everything to the cops, and they let her go with the child. Even though Loudermilk's like, what are you doing? She's obviously unstable, so why the hell are you letting her go with a baby? But the cops say, well, we can't do anything for them. Just because she's a little bit crazy, it's not our thing. she's not hurting the child, she's not constantly high or drunk, so we've got no reason to actually keep the child. But the cops tell him because of this mistake that they've made, obviously tackling him to the ground, that if there's any way that they can repay him and instead of him actually going through the courts on this, then they'll work something out. But Annette ends up taking Clyde. And Loudermilk tells her, look, if you ever do need help, just come and talk to me. Don't just dump him on me like you did this time. Like, I'm happy to come and get him and look after him, but just don't feel like you're struggling. Don't feel like you're alone. Which is a lot of growth for Loudermilk. Again, he's an arsehole and he's very self-involved, so to want to give that kind of support to someone who isn't from his group, it feels like he is developing outside of his own current world. And yeah, it's his brother, but he didn't really know her or him until recently. So it's good to see that he is capable of that kind of growth. And then he has to go and attend group. And during this group session, Muggsy actually comes out with the fact that even though last season he managed to get to see his kids and that things are starting to develop well for them, it seems that now 2 of his kids aren't actually talking to him and he doesn't understand what to do. The group tell him, look, just keep at it, keep going for them, keep trying to talk to them, because he's told the group that he's basically cut off contact with them. They didn't want to talk to him, so he's not bothered anymore. And that's not the attitude to have. He needs to make sure that they know that he's open for them. And so the group advise him to just keep trying, keep plugging away, because you aren't helping anyone if you just cut yourself off from them. After the session, Ben says to Loudermilk that was intense, because obviously Loudermilk's had a bad day. He's lost the kid, and now he's had this really heartbreaking story about Muggsy. And he does care about them. He does care about this group. Ben tells him, look, I'm thinking about doing something to get myself back out there again. I want to get into the job that I was doing before. And he tells Loudermilk that he's going to go and buy a broken ambulance. And then he's going to turn it into a food truck because Ben is a former chef. And from there, he's hoping that he can start making some good money and he'll be able to pay Loudermilk the rent that he owes him. But when asked by Claire how he's going to get the money to pay for this thing, Ben tells her, I've got a little bit of money coming in from my alimony from Memphis. And Loudermilk realises that he is actually still paying Memphis her alimony. So it turns out that actually he's paying Memphis is paying Ben, so technically Loudermilk is paying Ben. And so he tells him, look, you're bad at negotiating, so I will go with you and we will sort out this van. They do, and I mean, this van's fucking awful. It's covered in shit, it's covered in moss and mould and all sorts of crap, so Ben really has to do a proper job on this to actually get it to a peak level to be able to serve food out of it. Loudermilk, however, goes to group. When he gets there, it turns out that there is a new group in the actual hall, and they look like something out of fucking Cobra Kai. The leader is a guy who looks like he's just come out of prison with a biker handlebar mustache, and he is an absolutely aggressive arsehole. He essentially tells Loudermilk that he doesn't like the way Loudermilk runs his group and that he runs his group better. This guy's named Tiger for a start, so you can kind of see what kind of douchebag this guy is. The people that are stood around him, his group, are actually all fucking jacked. And he tells Loudermilk that he's coming after him and his group because he doesn't like the way that the group is being run. This guy ends up leaving and Loudermilk goes and talks to Father Mike. Father Mike remembers this guy and tells Loudermilk, look, he's a dangerous man. He used to run the group in the church and now he doesn't because I got rid of him because he lost his license. I then hired you and now he's after you for revenge on me. And so Father Mike and Loudermilk go and talk to this guy. He's unreasonable, but he says, look, if there's a competition to be had, let's do it. Me versus you, or your crew versus my crew, and we'll bury you at whatever we can do. Loudermilk suggests a spelling bee, but this guy says, no, we're going to do kickball. And of course it was going to be something athletic and not something intellectual, because this guy is just basically a jock. After a chat with the group, Loudermilk actually accepts. But at first he was unsure whether to. Once the group thought that Loudermilk had no faith in them, he ends up accepting on their behalf. They go down to this local park and they all play kickball together. However, the jock team end up absolutely battering Loudermilk's team, because of course they do. But eventually Loudermilk's team score a point. They're all happy and joyous about this because, well, they're a nice bunch, but they are a bunch of losers at the end of the day. And it doesn't mean you always have to be a winner. They are just making their own way. They are struggling their own way. And they have a lot of good points. But this isn't their strong suit. So Why would they think that they would be able to get away with a physical game like this? But just when Tiger thinks that he has absolutely won, the two cops from previous turn up. They essentially tell this guy to back off and not come anywhere near this group again because he's been harassing, and he has also just been seen pushing Loudermilk. And that if Loudermilk wants to press charges, he can. Tiger tells them that he can't go back to jail. He's already been there and it did things. And so he makes an agreement with Loudermilk that he's not going to come anywhere near him again. And eventually he slinks off. That's the cops repaying their debt to Loudermilk, so they slink off as well, and Loudermilk and the group can go back to normal. Ben, however, after opening up this van, thinks that this guy is following him. Turns out that this guy has eaten a couple of times at this van already, and Ben thinks he's a health inspector. So every time this guy starts walking over to them, they pack up quickly and scarper. However, after his kickball game where Ben is serving food, this guy comes back over again and just misses Ben but catches Loudermilk. Essentially, this guy owns a restaurant and he wants Ben to either come work for him, or if he knows of anyone that needs work, to put them in contact with him. So, turns out that even though it was a daft idea at the time, it could be quite good for Ben. But again, I said that about the singing. So, he's kind of hopping between all these different things that he's doing. And hopefully he'll settle in the next 4 episodes and it'll culminate well at the end. Okay, so this series has been a little bit hit and miss for me so far. I've loved the comedy within it. I think the fact that Loudermilk is slowly growing throughout the entire run of this is telling. And as much as he doesn't want to involve himself in the outside world, sometimes he's having to, because it is directly affecting his life. And it's good that he isn't losing his shit as much as he has been before. I mean, he does in the phone shop, but most of the time he isn't. He's trying to temper his anger. But he doesn't shy away from saying what he thinks as well, which is also a very good thing. But I think that the baby angle in this was a little bit odd. They put this baby character in there and then took them away after 2 episodes. And yes, the baby may come back at some point, but now it feels like they've broken the trust of the audience when they brought in this new element that Loudermilk's meant to care about. But again, in reality, they couldn't keep the character in there because eventually people are going to start looking at him like, why do you have a baby? Did you adopt? Is this legal? Like, questions were being asked of Loudermilk. So I think for the realism of it, it makes more sense that they took the baby back. But yeah, it's weird. And I'm glad that they did because, again, I'm not a fan of give them a child. That'll make the plot a lot more palatable because it just doesn't for me. But now that that element is gone, they've got this new element coming in with this secondary group. Now, whether that is just a plot point for the last episode or whether it's going to continue throughout the season, I don't know. But they named the character, and I've seen it on Wikipedia that this guy's a regular or a reoccurring character. So it makes me think that this guy's going to be around for a few episodes. But I don't know. Like I've said, I love Will Sasso in this, and I love Ron Livingston in this, and Anya Savcic is brilliant. I think they're all great. I think they're a good trio to actually lead a TV show. But I think that the flaw in this situation is the actual story now. Yes, we are getting to a certain place with Loudermilk, and that is a good thing, but I just think some of the methods that they've used to get there are a bit off. But I'm not a writer, so I wouldn't know. Anyway, I'm done bashing this show. I do love it. I think it's great. It really is funny. And I just think I've had a bit of a downer on it since the, initial episode. But anyway, I'm done for today. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about this amazing show. It's really funny. It really is. And so well acted. I can't fault the 3 actors in it for what they are doing because it's just very well done. But I'm done for today, so thank you for listening. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, blah, 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 all that good shit. But until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.